Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today, at this time of hundreds of thousands of young people and parents looking at universities and the future of education and the young, is at the apex of the institution that influences and helps shape the contours of higher education in India. He's also a distinguished academic with a PhD in economics, a professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, on deputation as the director of the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies. He's chairman of the University Grants Commission, who's written extensively on the politics, the economics, and the problems and issues related to social discrimination, marginalization, and stigmatization. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Sukhadeo Thorat. A lot of people sort of sitting on edge at this time where university admissions are happening, worried and anxious on the issues of reservations, but importantly, on the quality and aspirations of higher education. You head the University Grants Commission that, in a sense, shapes the contours of university education in India. What for you is the intention, the aspiration of a good university education?
You know, we have a very sufficiently long tradition of higher education in this country. We started with 25 universities, and we have now 325 universities in the country.
7,000 colleges that come under the
18,000 colleges, but UGC was set up in the early 50s, and the University Grant Commission was assigned the responsibility of promoting higher education, monitoring higher education, and helping to promote the higher education. So, since that time the higher education has expanded quite significantly. We have about 8% of our youth in the age group of 18 to 23, which are now going to the higher education.
Beyond the volumes, there's also the concern and the fear that the quality of that education, the focus of that education as the grooming ground of India's future is diminishing, that student teacher ratios are rising. You hear of ad hoc appointments in colleges and the issues of autonomy of institutions, too much government interference, the lack of resources and funding. The public perception is one of general despair at that falling educational standard. So while the volumes and the statistics might be reassuring in some ways, what is your sort of take on that, and what is your passion, commitment, and promise for the next 5 years of your tenure?
No, I must say, share with you. I think the important point that we have to recognize is that University Grant Commissions has been working on the 5 goals, on the basis of 5 goals. One is to improve the access, which I have already mentioned. Second is to have an equity and equal opportunity to marginalized section. And the third one, the one that you have mentioned, is to promote the quality education and the excellence. And I must share with you that University Grant Commission has developed and set up. They have established what is called NAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council, which has an office in Bangalore. And their constant job for the last 50 years has been to improve the standard of education by using certain methodologies. So this
philosophical vision of what is a good education.
Let me complete. These institutions accredit, this organization accredit the university and the colleges who come voluntarily on their own, and they get grade A minus, A plus, B plus, and that also entitle them for additional grant from the University Grant Commission. The University Grant Commission has developed its internal mechanism of promoting universities of excellence. First batch was 6 universities, then second batch is another 6 universities. Then we have what is called concept of centers of the state university of excellence. We promote them. Colleges with the potential of excellence. We have declared this year about 40 colleges with the potential of excellence. And above all, we declare centers of excellence. And there are a huge number of department, colleges and the university which have been identified as potentially excellent, and we support them. What I am trying to say in another word is that UGC have an internal mechanism to promote excellence, to monitor quality of the educations. So I think this perception that the education quality has gone down, in my view, is not correct. What I would, however, would say that as the education expand in our country, from the urban to the rural, as it expands, there are problems. And those problems UGC keep a close watch.
But tell us, as the academic visionary that you are, you have written so extensively. You're an academic with hundreds of publications and numerous books. Beyond the sort of the institutional, UGC has got these centers and research and accreditation. Philosophically, what is the goal? If you, as a young person entering university, what can he hope for? What would you like him to get out of a university education?
See, the crux of the higher education in India, in my view, is that we provide a basic education in any of the discipline, which help him to develop his potential. The getting specific skill and improving employability is a side effect of his education. But then university structures and courses and curriculums are developed in a manner that he get the basics of science, basics of humanities, whereby he is able to develop his personality, explore his capabilities as such, and become a very meaningful participant in society.
So in a sense, it's training the mind, training the student to continue a lifelong process of learning. In that sort of definition or aspiration for education, what role or what space does sort of, in a sense, the obsession with a lot of sort of technical vocational courses at universities, what role does that have? Don't you despair at the diminishing or rather the increasing student-teacher ratios, that there are fewer teachers and more students, where this training of the mind, this philosophical aspiration is in fact diminishing, and that the notions of centers and institutions of excellence, are they really furthering this kind of philosophical vision that you have articulated?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Ever since the University Grant Commission has started assessing the academic excellence and standard, you find that an increasing number of universities and colleges and centers have achieved that level. So I think with the growth of higher education and with the growth of students and the teachers coming into higher education, we are getting increasingly good people in the universities and in the colleges.
You're watching a conversation with Dr. Sukhdeo Thorat, the chairman of the University Grants Commission, a distinguished economist and academician. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with Dr. Sukhdeo Thorat. Let's get to sort of the issue that's much more a part of your passion and a lifelong study and articulation, and that is the problem of social discrimination, social stigmatization. You have written and studied that extensively, and you have edited books and in your capacity as director of the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies. It is an issue that's sort of on the front burner these days, and certainly as applies to universities and education. I think that few people in civil society tend to argue against the principle of affirmative action, and much of the debate gets stuck on the specifics, on the issues related to it. And I don't want to get into an interrogation of that, but just it would be wonderful if you could give us a philosophical sense of some of the issues that come up. The issue of merit, the issue of the need for an economic basis rather than a caste-based dimension of it. What is the justification for, in your mind, for reservations?
Well, I think let me make a couple of general observations. We have to recognize the character of the Indian society. There are many features of it, but one of the exclusive character of the Indian society that it is discriminatory and exclusionary in nature, associated with the institution of caste, ethnicity, religion, gender. Now, what does that mean? Social exclusion means, or discrimination means, that you exclude certain group from having an equal right because of their group identity. So if untouchables were denied right to property or education or business till the beginning of the 20th century, it is not because somebody was poor or rich, but it is because it is a social group called untouchable, which under the code of the caste were denied those rights. women were denied those rights. Tribals face not a structural kind of exclusion, but they do face in geographical isolation and thereby social exclusion. So, the remedies against discrimination and exclusion is a separate set of remedies that has been developed not only in India, but also all part of the countries. Whenever there is exclusion leading to deprivation and poverty because of group based exclusion and denial of right, specific policies are developed which with a different name. We call it a reservation, USA might call it affirmative action, Malaysia call it new economic policy. But and these are the policies, let me emphasize, these are the policies different than the policies which are against poverty. The purpose is the same, but the anti-poverty policies are different than the policies which are against discrimination. So that has to be understood, and we recognize as back as 1920 the problem of discrimination in the Indian society be associated with caste system, and therefore we developed the remedies against those systems. It began with 1930 with Pune Pact between Ambedkar and Gandhiji, and then it was carried on to the in the constitutions.
I think that people sort of question the the validity of the problem or the need for intervention and a solution. I think the debate is really about the kinds of solutions that might emerge. So what is the philosophical basis for the kinds of solutions that are emerging? That you have reservations and that you select people on the basis of their caste, provided they meet a certain basic minimum entry requirement, and you just keep sort of adding to layers of reservations. I think what is the basis?
I think let me share with you. Much of the debate, I am sorry to say, is based on a lot of stereotype and a very limited understanding of the issues. If you look at the World War, let me summarize very briefly that three kind of remedies that have been used against the discrimination of certain group. One is that somebody is discriminated and excluded from employment or education not because he is incapable, but simply because he belongs to a particular group. He is a African American, he is untouchable, he is a woman, or belong to a certain religion. So first remedy is to have an act against discrimination, so that if I am discriminated, I can have access to court of law. That is the first remedy everywhere used. We have anti-untouchability act, USA has Equal Opportunity Act, and in Northern Ireland has a Fair Employment Opportunity Act. But law by itself does not provide you enough safeguard against the discrimination, because the group that discriminates is a powerful group. So therefore second remedy has come, and that is how to provide fair access and participation to the discriminated group. And therefore several policies have strategies have been developed to give them the fair share in employment, in education, in politics. We have all the three. China has affirmative action policy for politics, for education as such. Now the issue is that if you give a fair share, how do you measure fair share? So in most of this country, the fair share of a community, discriminated group, is measured in terms of population. That if they constitute 14%, let them have 14% seat in the education institution or in employment. Now we called it a quota. There are informal quotas. I am sorry to say, Rajiv, that the quota has been confused with the policy by a large majority of our academics. Quota is a method whereby you give a fair, you measure a fair share. Quota is not a policy. There are a huge number of academics in this country which equate quota and write about it, misrepresenting the issue. So that is one thing. Even in USA, where there are no quotas, they do measure that whether the African American has a due representation or not. How do you measure the appropriate representation? They also take the population share, they also take the labor share. It's only that they don't have a formal, we have a formal. We are much better than them, to be very frank. We don't praise our method, we really draw a negative aspect of the meaning out of it. That is one thing. Third remedy that has been used in the world is that reservation policy or affirmative action policy, or what I would use, fair access policy and participation policy, is a protection against the present discrimination. That I am not treated equally because of my group identity in employment and education, therefore there is a present discrimination. But reservation policy of this sort fail to take the note of the discrimination and denial of right which has been experienced for longer period of time. For example, untouchable here in India, at least for 2000 years, till the beginning of the arrival of the Britishers, did not have a right to property and right to education. In fact, some of the occupation were completely banned, except the polluting occupation. Now, what do you do of this historical denial? The consequences of which, that the 65% of untouchable are landless, illiteracy is very high, they don't have access to business. For that purposes, everywhere in the world, in addition to the legal safeguard, in addition to the reservation policy, what they have used is what is called reparation or compensation policy through a one-time settlement. And that has been done in Malaysia, that Malayas were given a land at one go, because they were suffering from denial of right to land. So compensation or reparation policy is the third remedy which is used. Quotas and other things are the instrument of giving a fair share, which we have terribly confused in the Indian context.
You have written very extensively in support of reservations in the private sector.
Yeah.
Again, sort of popular conventional wisdom has it that in an economy that's essentially opening up to the imperatives of competition and implicitly merit, that there is really no room for reservations. What is your argument?
Oh, that's a very important question that you raise. Again, there is a writing which has created an illusion about the merit and efficiency. Indian constitutions, of which Dr. Ambedkar has a major role to play, he specifically mentioned that the due share should be given to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, subject to efficiency. Admission to the education institution, employment in government jobs is subject to minimum required qualification. Nobody is saying that the untouchable candidate should have a qualification which is less than what is required. What is done in reality is that a 5% concession is given, and then again that is seen that it does not affect the productivity. So it has been so misleadingly overplayed by the academician. For example, let us take the education. How does it affect the educational standard when you give a scheduled caste, you get an admission in the college or any university with a less percentage of mark, 5% margin? He work hard, the passing qualification is the same for him and a general candidate. So he pass out with his abilities and qualities. No concession is given to him in minimum qualification. And it is played as that it is affecting the merit and the educational standard. I can tell you one thing: if you take a group of the scheduled caste boys or tribe boys and see their grade B plus or B minus, you will get equal number of boys from the other group with the same grade. So education reservation gives only an opportunity to the scheduled caste boy to take education. How does it what relation it has got with merit? It's an opportunity.
Let's apply this. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with you.
Please, go ahead. No, you can ask me. I will try to answer that.
What we're not really saying is that you give a person 5% or 10% concession in terms of marks. I think what we're really saying is that this number of seats are blocked for you, regardless of where you are on the merit list, as it were. And I think also that the issue that raises substantial concern is that in the context of scarce resources and maybe political promises of expanding the number of seats and number of institutions and the numbers that may be available, that the non-reserved quotas and people will not be affected. There's considerable skepticism about the ability of institutions such as the UGC to deliver higher volumes of quality education when you're struggling to achieve quality with the existing education that you offer. But I mean, this is a debate, and we can go on this, but I think that the interesting area of your work has really been in private sector employment, private sector commercial activity. And tell us about the economic argument that you have so eloquently developed for reservations. And I don't want to use reservation and just saying block it all, but let's say of bringing into the fold the otherwise disenfranchised and stigmatized, marginalized sections of the community.
But quickly I respond to your first question, because that is very important. I mean, I would not like to avoid it. That by giving a quota to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and possibly OBC, of course the equal number of the positions are reduced for the other. I think that is an issue, a genuine issue to which we should address, and the government trying to address. That's an issue of supply side, So that issue should be taken care of.
But do you think
that doesn't mean that we should not recognize that the untouchable and tribal were denied that right for several years, and we should not provide a space. It must be understood one thing. Let me repeat. If you find that enrollment ratio among higher caste to be terribly high, 90%, 80%, it is primarily because for ages together a space was created, a secure space was created for them by denying admission to others.
But then how long would this process of, well, I was going to say retributive equity, but I'm not sure that's the correct phrase, but how long would you sort of do this for? I think that's also an argument.
No, that's a very important question. That's a very
how long can we keep doing this?
That's very important questions. I agree with you. There are two indicators whereby you should measure the continuity of this measure. As long as there is a discrimination in the society, as long as a scheduled caste, a woman, and a other person is discriminated on the basis of his group identity, you ought to provide him protection. State has an obligation to provide the protection.
Meanwhile, new discriminations are constantly emerging.
Then you have to address those. You cannot say that we will avoid those discrimination. In USA, it physically handicapped, the people with a overweight, they are given protection.
Puerto Ricans, illegal Mexican immigrants, and will be affirmative action for each group.
Oh, absolutely. If you, we have done a study for 20 countries, and the affirmative action policies are against the discrimination based on social origin like caste, ethnicity, religion, nationality, color, and and gender. Whenever there is a discrimination of a person not based on his merit and quality but on his group identity, state has an obligation to provide him equal status and equal opportunity. So it will continue. So it's a absolutely wrong way of asking the question which the academicians are asking, that how long it will continue. It will continue as long as discrimination prevail. The other policies will also continue as long as there are intergroup inequalities. Now let me go to your question of private sector.
Okay, we'll do that right after this break. You're watching a conversation with the chairperson of the University Grants Commission, a scholar and academician on the issues of discrimination and marginalized communities. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with Dr. Sukhdeo Thorat. There's so much to discuss with you, but time's running out, so give us a brief answer. Then I want to ask you about your own experience as a Dalit.
Well, let me in 2 sentences ask about the private sector.
Yes.
The foundation of the anti-discrimination policy is that the discrimination prevail in the society. In the private sector, discrimination prevail in employment, discrimination prevail in various market. Therefore, there is a need of protection against discrimination in the private sector. Private sector may not accept that they use exclusionary policies, but they do accept now, and therefore you require for that.
But apart from that moral imperative, you've also argued that it's economic good sense.
So that is this is an economic argument, that they do not follow the policy, merit-based policy to a larger extent. The policies are exclusionary in nature, in the sense that, let me give you a statistic, only 30% of recruitment in private sector are through open advertisement and employment exchange. 60% recruitment, that is the statistic, are through informal channel where caste, personal relations matters. So I am not saying they are taking worst, they are taking good, but they are not taking the best, because they are not following the policies which will give them the best. And therefore, the socially marginalized group get excluded. I won't name the industries. There are industries where 50% of the labor force is Brahmin and Marathas in my Maharashtra state. There are industries where 50% of the employees are Gujaratis. This country is consist of many people. So I think private sector now recognize that they follow knowingly, unknowingly the policies of discrimination. Therefore, you do require policies, step against discrimination, which will provide equal access to the meritorious one. Nobody is saying that you take the less qualified, but take those who are meritorious and don't deny them on the basis of their group identity.
Your academic passion and your work and your career has been born from personal passion, personal experience as a young Dalit of exclusion. And I was reading an article of yours where you talked about how you and your brother, settled physical scores with an upper caste young man who was given a seat next to the principal when he was still in school over a meal, and you were excluded from that process. So obviously, the wounds run deep, and you have brought both sort of philosophical vision, academic insight into your work. Today, when you're at the sort of, you're at the apex of this this striving with the University Grants Commission, with a long journey beyond that. What are your feelings today? Do you still feel in your position where you are with the long journey and the things that you have overcome, that you're still a Dalit fighting for a cause?
Yeah, obviously. I won't put that way. What I will put is that we have this problem of Indian society, a major problem, which is characterized by discrimination and exclusion of certain groups and historical denial of right and continuation of that denial in some form.
Do you experience it today?
Today, well, you asked me my childhood. I think I went through a very tough childhood, and you have read that autobiographical account. Maybe I was required to sit separately in the school, but the moment government building was constructed, then that disappeared. So in a society which is ridden with the discrimination, you do face discrimination, and I have come through that tough time. There is no doubt about that. Even higher level academics. We get into an open society, a secular society, but groups prevails.
Yeah, you've written about how the time before you went to the United States and you were at the JNU, that your productivity had fallen because you felt excluded and from the environment for a while, and then when you came back from your studies in the United States, there was this tremendous self-confidence that was infectious, and you were able to assert yourself. So it isn't a process that ends just when you enter the portals of
certainly not.
excellence.
The levels vary. I would submit that you had raised these questions in the beginning, and there were very important questions which I could not answer. The point is that your ability to overcome discrimination improves if you are educated man and if you are economically strong man. But that doesn't mean that the discrimination disappear altogether. If that is the case, we would not have an anti-discriminatory policy in Northern Ireland, where Roman Catholics are discriminated by the Protestant, and Roman Catholics are fairly economically strong. One has to understand that the discrimination has nothing to do with the economic background. It's a different matter that your economic strength enables you to overcome those discrimination. So one has to understand, either you are in academic or in employment or any other sphere of life, discrimination at a different level prevails.
What are the personal qualities that you feel have helped you transcend this? After all, not everybody succeeds.
The point is, I think that's a very important question. I derive a positive strength from the discrimination. I look at the issue of a society, and I gone step ahead. I don't took that as a guilt, and I don't blame others for that, but I derive a strength from that and went ahead. And I think our society had provided a space increasingly over a period of time. Ambedkar's movement brought that issue. Gandhiji brought the issue of untouchability on national scene and incorporated in the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution recognized this problem, passed Anti-Untouchability Act, and empowered the state to develop policy, which the state has developed. So there is a considerable amount of space that we have created. But a civil society is what it is, So you are really living between the two worlds. The Constitution asking for equality in society is encouraging some of those inequality features, and you continue to face that.
Well, Dr. Thorat, your words and your life are a testimony to possibility and hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This has been a great pleasure.